Good morning, dear friends and fellow alumnus. Only a few life stories lend themselves to script for the movies. Well, today we have with us one such personality whose journey from sunstruck Tamil Nadu to starry Hollywood is worth of a movie spin. When he entered the portals of Annamalai University in 1983 to study electronics and instrumentation engineering, little did our own Mr. Incredible realize that it was a stepping stone to the big, bold, and beautiful technicolor world of cinema. Like Buzz Lightyear's life, Arjun Ramamurthy's too has been quite an adventurous ride. And like in the movies, the journey might have thrown up many surprises, but the destination has been something that's close to his heart. Dear friends, put your hands together for this alumni from our university who has made an impact in Hollywood in his own way. For the boys of the 1987 batch, Arjun is an old pal. For me personally, it sees like one of Disney's dreamlike movies to someone I know so closely to rise so dramatically up the ranks. Our days at the hostel and on campus were filled with some tragic comedy comments, which we will continue to cherish for a long time. Being roomies means a lot those days when bonding on campus was seen as a lifetime friendship. Our time on the basketball court and the cricket field was filled with laughter that rings in my mind even today. You will not be surprised at his current professional assignment at Disney and 20th Century Fox. If I were to tell you that even in the 80s, he was the finance secretary in the university. Being a smart guy, he was quick to learn the importance of staying wired and made that quick move to computer science at Clarkson University. Today, his expertise has sparkled in the areas of setting technology direction for motion pictures and TV productions, post-production work, digital content processing, downstream distribution, and digital archiving. And you can imagine he has been involved with some of the biggest names and banners in Hollywood, ranging from Disney and 20th Century Fox to Marvel and Pixar. And all along, he did not forget his Indian roots. He was involved with Star India, and he was directly called in to launch and integrate Hotstar with Disney Plus. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to cut short this title track and credits and welcome you to the movies itself. Over to our hero of the day today, Arjun Ramamurthy. Thank you, guys. Have a nice time.
Thank you, Gopi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gopi. Thank you very much.
Hey.
Thanks, Gopi. Thanks, Tariq.
16 for reduction, and we will revisit another.
Are you good for me to start now, Tariq, or should I wait?
Yes, Arjun, we can start, and we request everyone to kindly mute themselves so that we can hear the speaker clearly. And core committee members, kindly please make sure that everybody is muted. And Arjun, it's again a special moment today. We have crossed 100 participants in a Zoom meeting today, and you are actually addressing around 111 members. The floor is all yours.
Well, I'm muted too. Okay. Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, Gopi. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be invited to the AABN network. Also, it's really a privilege to also meet Mr. Sivaraman we're indeed honored. So no pressure following him up. So thanks, Gopi. I thought you were going to be way more blunter, but you were way too polite for good friends. But I guess I should watch out for the remainder of the talk and wait for surprises from you. So, once again, I'm really happy to see so many old faces, new faces, and look forward to meeting all of you. As Gopi mentioned, I did finish from the 87 E&I batch from Anamle. And after that, I essentially followed up with working in graphics and imaging. And that's really what was the foot in the door for me to come into the media entertainment business. I've been with 20th Century Fox and now through the merger with Disney for about 13 years. Prior to that, a dozen years with Warner Brothers and Deluxe. And really considering that this is a business network, thought kind of talk a little bit about my perspectives and some of the opportunities that are worldwide in the media entertainment space. So once again, thank you for having me, and hope you enjoy this. Okay, so now that we're in the movie mode, we've had the fanfare. Today, the idea was to really focus on how do movie and TV shows make money. Fundamentally, how is it that we're able to put actors in front of a camera and sound people and lighting and capture all of that, pay them oodles of money, and how do we actually recoup all of that? And is there indeed a value proposition for somebody to invest in this and actually make money? So that's really what I decided to kind of focus this talk on, primarily from a business standpoint. So traditionally, as we make movie and TV shows, there's always been the avenue of showing this theatrically. So in a theater, in a cinema theater, it's opening the movie there. And then subsequently, the traditional formats of being able to show it on a TV or VHS or DVD and Blu-ray. We've now expanded that into a lot of the streaming services available through mobile or handheld devices. But then besides that actual consumption, there's an overall strata which is based all around actual brand identification. So a huge big portion of the entire movie process and the revenue stream also comes from toys and merchandising. So any of you who have children, grandchildren, looking at action figures, the Disney princesses, or any of the toys, that's a big revenue stream also. Additionally, getting people to interact with the actual characters and the canon of the movie through parks and theme parks and amusement parks is another big revenue stream generator. And lately, it's also all of the alternate means of entertainment and immersing yourself in media, from VR to augmented reality to extended reality. And if all of that is making money, then of course the big question here is, how do I get a piece of the pie? Or more importantly, how do we all get a piece of the pie? So that's really a portion of my focus today. So the logical question is, hey, but what about all the cool stuff? So
Senate gets wind of our project, counter systems will flop.
sorry.
Senate gets wind of our project, counter systems will flock to the rebellion. When the battle station is finished, Governor Clark, the Senate will be of little concern. When has become now, dear Attorney, the Emperor will tolerate no further delay. You have made time an ally of the rebellion.
Okay, so what you saw there was a lot of the actual technical wizardry that actually goes into a lot of the blockbusters. From a combination of 3D modeling, texturing, animation, and rigging. But then a lot of the cooler stuff with facial replacement, facial capture, motion capture. And we can go on and on into 3D rendering and all of those pieces. While that's the cool technical stuff, that isn't what we're going to talk about today. We bring that up. Happy to come back another time and chat about it, but figured this time we can talk a little bit more about the actual nuts and bolts and how do we actually make money out of this. So let's back up a little bit and give you an idea of the Walt Disney Company as such. The Walt Disney Company was founded by Walt Disney in 1923. So it's almost about 100 years old. And we have about 223,000 employees. And fundamentally, the company is no different than a traditional factory. We're essentially looking at making content. So there's an actual group labeled under Studio Entertainment, which is essentially a factory that's generating all of this content. We then have to have some place in a way in which we can actually make that available to a customer. So we actually have a marketplace or a customer storefront. That's all of our parks and experiences. For customers who cannot actually come to us, we utilize a delivery network through our media networks group to actually provide all of that content. And finally, if people want to essentially consume that content both internationally as well as directly on any number of newer devices in the streaming world, then our direct-to-consumer group essentially provides this. A quick note of, we talk a lot about digital supply chain, and this is no different. This is fundamentally fulfilling a digital supply chain. The only difference is we've actually been digital since the mid-90s. So as we're basically seeing transformation, digital transformation happen, the actual motion picture and television business has actually been digital since the mid-90s. And then from a theatrical standpoint, with the advent of digital cinema in the mid-2000s, we have actually done away with any kind of print. So this entire piece is actually entirely riding on a digital backbone. Now, Disney specifically, it's one of the 6 major motion picture studios in Hollywood and across the world. Our competitors are people like Sony, NBC Universal, Paramount, Warner Brothers, and those are the big ones. And then, of course, we have the new upstarts in Netflix and Amazon. The company, like I mentioned, is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, has revenues in excess of about 200 billion, is a market cap of over 200 billion with about annual revenues of about 70 billion or so. So as we looked at the whole notion of factory, Walt Disney began with an overall animation studio, but then through a variety of acquisitions, brought on Pixar, Lucasfilm through the whole Star Wars piece, and then 20th Century Fox as part of the Fox acquisition last year. And that entire group essentially is responsible for all of the content generation. So we're the ones who make all the TV shows and movies, and then feed them into either television or through our direct-to-consumer efforts in streaming through Disney Plus or Hotstar or Hulu, and at the same time make the actual IP for all of our theme parks. So hopefully some of you have visited some of our theme parks, from Disneyland to Walt Disney World to either Paris, Tokyo, Shanghai, or Hong Kong. But a big portion there is really how you can actually experience firsthand the movies that you actually watch either at home or on the screen, but now you're actively immersing yourself with it. And then, of course, a big portion is we'd love for you to actually buy some of those toys and actually take some of that experience home. So that's our entire shopping experience and that scenario. As part of the acquisition, of course, with Fox, Star TV, and then in India, UTV, which I believe is also another TV broadcaster, is also now part of that overall worldwide Disney mouse house, if you will. In addition, we have a couple of TV stations as part of the broadcasting ABC group, as well as sports through ESPN. So that gives you an idea of Disney as such. But the important thing I really wanted to impress on you is it is fundamentally a factory which allows for a storefront as well as a delivery network. So with that in mind, and now that we've kind of gotten through the corporate portion, let's really talk about a movie. So we make a lot of movies. Typically, we have about 40 movies and about 25 to 30 television shows, each which have about 20 to 25 episodes during any calendar year. They're in some stage of production, but we're essentially looking to produce that level of content. And that level of content is looking to address all the different demographics. So you're looking for addressing kids below 18, the 18 to 24 segment, the romantic comedy, the horror genre, the older comedy set, the testosterone-fueled summer blockbuster movie, action thriller, all of those quadrants. And it basically touches on all of those. And then, of course, we also want to win the awards as part of the Academy Awards. So, of course, we make the art movies and things like that. So I wanted to, for this illustrative purpose, I actually wanted to show you what a blockbuster movie is. So a blockbuster movie in Hollywood parlance is essentially looking to fit the window between late November, which is called Thanksgiving here in the US, to about Christmas and New Year's, because that's a classic holiday period, or the period over summer, which is from late May to late August. Everybody's out of school, summer vacation, and we typically try and bookend both of these, the winter break and the summer break, with about 3 to 4 blockbuster movies. So if you think about a blockbuster, it's somewhere in the order of about $150 million. And you look at the actual production cost, that is what we are actually paying for the actor, the actresses, all of the people who are actively involved in shooting the movie. But then a production does not basically end. A production does not end when a director basically shouts cut. Typically, even for a large blockbuster movie, we're basically looking at actual live action shoot taking about 3 months or so. There are some which run a little bit longer, but by and large, we're essentially looking at about 3 to 4 months of actual dedicated shooting as you travel the world, different locations, and things like that. But after that initial shoot is really where the post-production process begins. That's where we go through adding all of the visual effects, all of the editorial in terms of getting the right shot across the different takes, making all of the changes, adding the audio, really making people look pretty, because from the initial shot, from that to the actual end piece is really some of the actual technical wizardry that you saw earlier. All of that process is really the production cost. Now, amazingly, that if we basically look at about 150 million or so, the marketing of that movie is almost as expensive. The marketing is really getting out all of the trailers, buying ad time, buying actual theater time to actually put that in front of people, making people aware of the movie, the story, social media, and all of the different avenues. And as the actual production took about 3 months, and the post-production typically takes about 15 to 18 months, the marketing period is also essentially kicked into gear in the last 6 months or so, and finally ramps up in the last month as the movie comes close to release. We then have all of the distribution costs, trying to basically get the movie out to theaters in terms of making the actual DVD, Blu-ray, making all of the downstream content for all of the OTT streamers, over-the-top streamers, and online delivery. Now, a big portion of, the movie cost is also essentially relegated to the back end. And what that basically means is all of the actors and actresses and the top billed people are guaranteed a certain amount of the profits, as well as every time the movie is shown in theaters or on TV or in other locations. So there are actual residual costs that are actually siphoned off from the movie also. And then, of course, finally, nobody actually puts this much amount of money. Most of the studios go out to either Wall Street or private equity to actually have some level of financing. So typically for about a $150 million movie, 20% is the actual financing cost in terms of actually funding the movie. So you tie all that together, and what you began with, which was an initial cost of about 150 million, you're now essentially carrying a burden of close to 400 million, to 374 in this example, to be precise. So that gives you an idea of how much we're actually spending on the movie. So where does it go? Where do we actually look at, and how do we think about what is its life cycle, and where are the places that it goes? So the initial opening for the movie is really the theatrical release. The theatrical release is one of the main reasons why directors and actors and everybody else comes to a big studio like Disney or Fox, because they're guaranteed to essentially have a big theatrical opening. You see it on a big 70-foot screen. You have the great audience experience with all of the audio and that entire experience, which is entirely different from the home experience. Now, the domestic release, and from what I mean by domestic is the US and North America, Canada release, is timed with the international release. So in the industry, we use a term called day and date. And the whole idea there is it is important for us to be able to launch the movie both domestically and internationally at the same time, for a variety of reasons. One, foremost, is piracy. If we release the movie here, then it essentially is available for any kind of pirate to essentially pirate it and then make it available in any subsequent market, which means the possible revenue stream in any one of those markets is also diminished. Secondly, it's also a question of timing. If a movie does really well here, then an international release will automatically propel it. If, however, it doesn't do well, then you have possibility of it not doing so well internationally also. So we basically prepare all of the content to be ready to be released domestically and internationally, and actually have all of the movie either on hard drives or through satellite distribution or just through the internet, actually deliver all of these movies up to 2 weeks in advance to over 150,000 screens in about 120 countries for a big blockbuster. All of those are keyed and protected so that until the actual release time, you cannot actually view them. And that keying mechanism is actually tied to the digital projector. So we have a full closed trust handshake with each of those distribution devices or projection devices, excuse me. So that's day one or day zero, if you will, of the movie actually launching. After that, we're essentially looking at two tranches, which are primarily the revenue streams for a movie. One is the offline model, and the second one is the online model, which has gained a lot more prominence in the past 5 years or so. So in the offline model, within about 2 to 3 months, we make available the content for the hospitality and airline industry. So you could be in a hotel and order the movie on your pay-per-view or bill it to your hotel room. Similarly, we also make that available for the physical distribution, which is still very active for DVD and Blu-ray. Similarly, on the online side, we make available for video on demand, but more transaction video on demand, which is really what you would do with iTunes or Amazon, where you would actually purchase that content, or electronic sell-through in about the 2 to 3 month window. Something that has happened more recently in the past 9 months or so is actually the introduction of premium home cinema. This is a company actually called Prima. There are a few others who are actually offering the movie within 4 weeks of release, where for about $500 or so, you can actually watch it at home. Excuse me, you don't have to be in a theater, but within 4 weeks, you can actually watch it at home. There are similar services, I believe, available in China and Far Eastern Australia. And I believe there's one starting up through PVR in India too. Following that is the paid TV model. So TV subscription that you actually pay for with Star Plus or people like HBO, they also get that in about the 2 to 3 to 4 month window. They're typically a little bit behind. So they typically are a little bit behind the transaction VOD. And then similarly, we have the subscription video on demand, which is Netflix or our own streaming services like Disney and Hotstar Plus. Further downstream, about 6 to 9 months after the movie release, is where we actually make it available for free television. So NBC or any of the other TV channels here in the US, Doordarshan or some of the other free TV channels in India, they would all be able to have access to this, depending on our licensing agreements, in about 9 months or so. And that's about the window by which time we have a very good picture in terms of, do we want to start making a sequel? Do we want to fire up the marketing machine all over again and start looking to make a sequel? And how do we essentially kind of keep this whole process going? Okay, So as we kind of looked at that life cycle, then let's look at the same blockbuster that we essentially had close to about 375 million spent in terms of actually making it. How does it make its money? Again, these are just average numbers. And to give you basically an idea, on average, the domestic theatrical is a very small segment. It's only about 70 million or so. One of our biggest growth pieces is, of course, internationally, across international markets. And for that about 70 million or so, we have about 100 million coming in from international theatrical. If we look at then home entertainment, and that's really the portion with regard to DVDs, Blu-rays, as well as other physical entertainment, it's still pretty large. As you can see, it basically generates close to 130 million or so, 125 million or so for that initial outlay. And then domestic TV and international TV bring in another about 87 million. Of course, as I had mentioned earlier, a big portion is really all of the licensing and merchandising that goes along with any movie. So the t-shirts, the fan material, the fan experience, all of that basically adds to the overall pot. So one thing you're probably thinking is, okay, that's great, but whatever happened to all of the VOD revenue? Here we're talking so much about video on demand and delivery to the consumer directly. So an interesting fact here is only about 4% of the actual revenue for the movie is actually coming in from video on demand. It's a very, very small segment on a per movie basis. So in this scenario, in this particular example, that would approximate to about 3.2 million or so. So the question is, we're spending close to 375 million, and our earnings on average is about 422. That's pretty tight. I mean, that's only about 50 million. And nobody has really figured out what is the winning formula for a winning movie. So Hollywood is all about going big or going broke. So a big portion is really, really spent on these large blockbusters with the hope that they'll actually come out making much, much more money. So for example, when we did Avatar, it did close to $2 billion worth of just worldwide revenue. You're not even including any of the home entertainment or any of those numbers. Similarly, when we released Avengers Endgame, it also did close to 2 billion. So those are the movies that can really kind of carry the model forward. But then at the same time, we have a huge number of flops. So essentially, we're looking at a very tight margin space. So if that's the case, where is the growth, right? So you basically look at year over year, and you essentially look at the domestic market, and the domestic market is relatively flat. So from 2015 to 2019, what I'm showing there is it's only at about 11 billion. It goes up or down a few, but I mean, that's not a growth business at all. Internationally, however, we're basically seeing a fair amount of growth. And then if you basically, well, if you actually just look at international on a overall sense, you're seeing little growth. You're seeing about a billion every odd year or so. But the real growth is actually as you look at which markets they're really progressing in. So the Asia Pacific market, including India, is an actual high growth area. So then the question is, how do we harness this and how do we essentially take advantage of this? So the three main pieces really come down to how do you grow your audience, how do you retain your audience, and in that scenario, how can you essentially make delivery to your audience way more targeted? And we'll talk about that in a second. And then looking at alternate means of actually providing that content and allowing the consumer to consume that content. And that comes with immersive media and things like that. So if we want to think about international markets, a growth area is how can we actually provide content to international regions, but actually be way more localized. So specifically India as such, how can you make it localized? But then, as you all know, India is actually a variety of are available for hyper-localization, where you can actually take advantage of each of the states and perhaps even break it down a lot more. Additionally, you can actually add by generating and producing local content. So through Star India, as well as through Fox International Pictures, we've actually been developing content locally in India for India, as well as the Indian market overseas. So that's a mechanism in which you can actually take advantage of bringing Hollywood productions and the capabilities and that style of motion picture production to generating local content. Obviously, digital consumption. How do you actually tailor for mobile usage? So simple use case is really comes down to something like, do I really want it to be in a widescreen format when everybody's watching their phone vertically? Are there ways in which you can generate content in that fashion? As we look at content being king, how do you improve the quality of transactional VOD? As more and more consumers utilize many more of these streaming services and you have the same amount of bandwidth, then you're now competing for limited bandwidth and quality in that same bandwidth. And how do you differentiate yourself in that scenario? How do you take advantage of new technologies for 5G and wireless, and also now provide other means of consuming and immersing yourself in that data with virtual and augmented reality? Another big piece that we're looking at and really anticipating a lot of growth is really in the short form consumption. People have attention spans, are willing to be entertained for 2 to 3 hours, but not all the time. They're looking for smaller content, 22 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. We are all used to commuting now and sitting in traffic for 20, 25 minutes. How can we essentially tailor content for that? How can we, as we're going on our commute or traveling to a particular business meeting or a family gathering, can I basically get a snapshot or a synopsis or a highlight reel of my favorite show, so I have enough to talk about, and then I can come back and find out if it was really interesting to continue talking. And excuse me, I have to move the Zoom screen to see. And as you saw earlier, if for one particular movie, the actual VOD contribution is only as little as 4%, then one way of actually retaining that audience and actually growing that audience is making it available, making your entire library available, right? So as we looked at that, we suddenly then have the battle for the eyeballs. This is really where the OTT streaming companies like Amazon and Netflix really have entered the market, and they've done a great job. They've essentially disrupted that whole market. But they have lived on the content that was essentially being provided by all of the studios. So Amazon and Netflix have grown their subscriber base. Netflix is somewhere in the order of about 180 million. And Amazon is sitting, as you can see, close to about 150 million subscribers. And these numbers are as of April this year. And all of the studios essentially stopped providing content to these streaming services and said, look, we have our own delivery networks. There is no reason that why we can't essentially provide content ourselves. So Disney Plus launched last year, and we're up to about 50 million. And then with Hotstar Plus, we have already about 8 million. It would have been quite a bit larger, and I was in India just before the Disney Plus Hotstar launch, and we were actually looking at the whole IPL also being supported on that platform. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, the entire IPL scenario fizzled out, but we're still seeing tremendous growth. And now we have Warner Brothers with their HBO Max. Very soon we'll have NBC with their Peacock. And then we've already got Apple TV with Apple TV Plus, right? So we have all of these subscribers, but then you flip over and say, well, how much content is actually available? And while Netflix and Amazon had a lot of the original studio content, and you can see they have the biggest pie right now, they don't have any more original content which any of the studios are providing. So what do they need to do? They actually need to go and actually produce all of that content. Netflix announced in 2019 that they're actually going to be spending $12 billion. And in 2020, they're actually going to be spending $15 billion. Apple has committed to spending over $6 billion, and Amazon is going to spend close to $10 billion. So guess what? That is a lot of money. And that is a lot of money which is ripe for opportunity and really to take advantage of. And that's really where I wanted to kind of bring our focus back. So where are the opportunities? Well, the opportunities exist throughout the movie life cycle. I'm going to touch on a few, and these are just illustrative purposes, but we can talk about a lot more of these in a lot more detail. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any interest in any one of these particular areas, or you have business aspirations in these areas, and we can talk some more. But I wanted to give you some examples in pre-production, production, through the post-production, the internationalization and localization, and the distribution mechanism. And it's important, I wanted to also emphasize that not looking at a big technology play here. There are smaller technology solutions, enterprise-wide solutions, so across the entire spectrum. So, so there isn't that much of a barrier to entry. It is fundamentally the old adage of if it's better, faster, cheaper, then it'll get used. So let's talk about pre-production. So traditionally, pre-production really comes down to all of the process before you put the actor in front of the camera. You're essentially looking at making sure you have all of your camera angles right. How do you want to actually have the actor? Where do you want the actor? How do you want the backgrounds? And a lot of that requires a lot of planning. And going back all the way to the days of Hitchcock, in fact, that is actually a set of storyboards from Hitchcock's movie, The Birds, all the way back to Hitchcock's days, where he would actually have an artist go in and draw out shot by shot where they would actually want the actor, how they would want the action, where they would want the camera. Well, as you can imagine, that's a painstaking process. It's not very iterative, and it's not that easy to change your mind or make impromptu discussions, impromptu changes, which is fundamentally what creativity is all about, right? You are in the moment where you basically have a spark, you want to be able to implement that. Well, we're seeing a huge transition from manual storyboards and that kind of a pitch idea to actually having pre-visualization on game engines. So here's an example of Avengers that was actually pre-visualized.
The entire time I knew him, he only ever had one goal: to wipe out half the universe. If he gets all the Infinity Stones, he can do it with the snap of his fingers. Just like that.
Tell me his name again.
Thanos.
We got one advantage. He's coming to us. We have what Thanos wants, so that's what we use.
Let's talk about this plan he has. I think it's good, except it sucks. So let me do the plan, and that way it might be really good.
Wow. The end is near. When I'm done, half of humanity will still exist. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. I hope they remember you.
So there you saw how you can actually tell and visualize the movie in a quality which far surpasses actual hand-drawn animation. But now you're looking at small computer or PC-based game engines for the same price as a small workstation, essentially performing all of the work that actually goes into high quality visual effects rendering, which takes hours and weeks on ends on render farms, which are close to 5,000 to 15,000 core machines. The advantage is, you can iterate very quickly, you can provide feedback to the director. But what we found at the studio also was we can essentially experiment much more quickly and proactively with any number of directors. Remember, we're trying to essentially provide large swaths of content to the consumer, which means we want to produce a lot of content, and we want to produce content that we feel is actually going to resonate. If we can essentially have directors work in this medium and put the whole movie together for a very small fraction of the budget, now we can think about actually exploiting these and making full-blown length movies with these game engines behind us. So that's one example where you can really take advantage. Obviously, game engines from Unreal and Unity are free to use. So here's an opportunity for engineers and artists around the world to really take advantage and kind of build upon this. So that's one example. Let's talk about production. So we're seeing, even prior to COVID-19, but we're seeing a a great desire and motivation to actually move away from being on location to actually working virtually and remotely. Here's an example of, for Star Wars, these are all the locations that we actually ended up going to actually film this. This is hugely expensive, a lot of talent that actually has to be brought along or locally trained so that you can actually support a movie production. And then you have all of the risk with all of your content and the time in production and all of those issues, right? So as we move over, we can start looking at utilizing LED screens with a virtual background. And now you can have the entire show actually happen in a single location. So if any one of you using Hotstar and Disney Plus has seen The Mandalorian, we actually did all of The Mandalorian on a virtual stage like this. We're actually talking to S.S. Rajamouli, who did Bahubali, in terms of how we can actually think about integrating some of his work into an actual virtual production. Now, the requirements there are really, can you creatively bring scenes that look accurate and display them inside an LED screen? And now you can have a soundstage essentially mimic any location for a fraction of the cost. Opportunities in post-production. Again, we want to be able to utilize the best talent in the location they are. So essentially utilizing remote editing and review tools, right? All of you have seen a bunch of video right now, and across Zoom and across all the latency across internet, it was probably stuttering. It was probably the audio was not probably in sync with the video. All of that we're willing to put up with because, well, what choice do we have? But realistically, you're not going to have creative people really work in a system which is not keeping video and audio in sync where they can make creative decisions. So there are some opportunities there in actually helping to develop better remote editing and review tools. The entire notion of motion picture and TV production is ripe for AI and machine learning. We're already using a lot of it, but there's still a lot more. Images are fundamentally redundant. It's the same shot, which is shown over and over again. It's basically a person standing behind some kind of a background. How can you basically take advantage of that? Additional things we're looking at is how do you actually integrate all of the production metadata with scenes for, again, providing a much more and richer consumer experience. So imagine a movie that you're watching, you really like the costume design and the actual jackets that the characters are wearing. If you actually had all of that metadata of where they could get it, and you actually had a tie-in with the corresponding department store where you could go purchase that, now you have a end-to-end purchase mechanism that is tied with the actual production information. So that's going to be coming soon to app near you. And then content protection and piracy abatement, right? That's more than anything else. That's one of the biggest arms race that we are constantly involved in. You've all heard about deep fakes and all of the possible problems with it. But then we are also very, very concerned with protecting our content from the time it is actually captured to all the 18 months to 19 months that it takes to actually make the final version. And for any content to leak in before that is actually hugely problematic. So how do you protect that content? How do you essentially prevent and abate piracy? looking at the international market, here is another area that is actually huge with and ripe for opportunity. Traditionally, we've always had language dubbing and subtitling, but as we grow our footprint, we've only essentially done dubbing, say, in either Hindi or Tamil. For something like Frozen 2, we may end up actually extending that to maybe 1 or 2 languages. But here's an opportunity to essentially bring the Indian expertise to say, for all of the languages that are available in India, how can I essentially offer dubbing capabilities? Building on that, can I actually start building machine learning and trained models to do some of that automatically? Can I now take that same content and then hyper target local states as well as local communities? And then can I also basically make that content specifically for that localized region? Additionally, there are a lot of sensitivities. In this particular example, it's a simple example of here's a kid show where you don't want the kids to necessarily see the graphic violence that's being shown. So how can we essentially build systems that know, depending on who the viewer is? So if you give your child your iPad and they're willing to see the same content, can you be sure that they're actually going to be seeing a G-rated version versus a PG or PG-13 version? And how can that essentially be done while the distribution chain is happening rather than going back to the actual production chain? And then finally, distribution, right? So if you actually talk about delivering this hyper-localized content to a region, then it's important to actually carry all of that metadata. Now, some of you and all of you may actually be aware that Priyanka Chopra was actually one of the people for one of the voices for Elsa in Frozen 2. But again, that isn't anything that is captured from a metadata standpoint, which would essentially allow for people in India, fans of Priyanka Chopra, to go watch Frozen 2, Priyanka Jonas Hill now, right? To actually go watch that movie because we haven't actually publicized it in that fashion. So that's all of the capabilities of taking title metadata and localized talent metadata and providing that for audience selection and preview. There's the whole integration of IoT for audience responsiveness to content, audience personalization. I feel in this mood, so therefore here is the content that is being recommended for me. I just had a fight with my wife, so I would love to see this kind of movie, or this is being recommended to me. Here are all the capabilities in which you can actually think about expanding those things. And then we have all of the newer forms of consumption of how you make it immersive. So virtual reality arcades, we are actually providing quite a bit of our content from The Martian to Star Wars into these arcades where people can actually have the lightsaber or drive the Martian rover. So now you're once again living part of the movie without actually going to a theme park. And you can now do it at home with social distancing, and you can participate across any kind of wireless or wired network. So that's what I have. I'm open to questions, and I'll stop sharing at this point.
Thanks, Mr. Arjun, for this versatile presentation on today's topic of business opportunities in media and entertainment. Very interesting topic, irrespective of age. I think all will have an unified interest in media and entertainment in one way or other. Today, you gave us an overview of the Walt Disney and its associated business in entertainment world. Really informative. Thanks for your detailed presentation. And you also highlighted on the stage-wise movie process production, which involves a lot of technological and financial aspects. It's really mind-blowing. Thanks for all the details you have provided us by taking so much time and efforts. Now
Happy
moving
to.
on to, thank you. So now coming on to the question and answer session. One question which was posted quite earlier itself by Professor Manikam from Annamalai Nagar. Let's start from our college place itself. What's the future of interactive movies? Do you feel it's viable?
The future of interactive what, once again?
What is the future of interactive movies? Do you feel it's viable?
So, sure. Netflix did a simple experiment with audience selection and you selecting where the end, which direction the movie could go. It certainly is a viable mechanism. The important question to ask always is, does that provide quantum step forward in actual revenue generation, in actual audiences willing to experiment with it? A lot of times that isn't necessarily the case because people want to be fundamentally entertained. So if I'm being entertained, I'm being told a story. I don't want to necessarily choose the story at every point because then I'm conducting that story. If I actually want to engage in it, there are a lot of ways, then I really, really want to engage in it, which means I really want to be in the world. I want to walk around. I want to have the character respond to me. So interactive is fine if you're actually looking at truly interactive. But I mean, there are obviously ways in which you can still have small amounts of control, but where we are seeing the bigger growth is in being truly immersive and truly interactive with the content.
Thanks, Mr. Tariq Kamal sir has reserved for a question, sir. Over to Mr. Tariq.
Yeah, thanks, Prabhakar. Thank you, Arjun, for a mind-blowing presentation. Away from the media and the movie industry, Disney also is involved in a lot of industrial projects like automation, robotics in theme parks, and a lot of movies like Transformer, where we see a lot of robotics coming into play. As our community, our business community is engaged in a lot of such services, especially our Annamalai business network entrepreneurs. They are into software, some are into media, some are into robotics, automation. What are the kind of opportunities that people may have through a franchise mechanism or any kind of a partnership where they can have a small pie of the business? What are the business opportunities for them?
Sure. So robotics in the area for theme parks is somewhat limiting, partly because of really the kind of scale we're looking at for animatronics or being able to move carriages around. So Walt Disney Imagineering, which is primarily our engineering group, which helps basically support that, They do a lot of work, but they actually develop a lot of the robotics themselves. Where I see a lot of opportunities from a manufacturing and production standpoint is really taking advantage of the capabilities in manufacturing for all of our licensing and merchandising. You see a lot of the toys, action figures, where if you actually have the capability of being able to produce injection molded systems, as well as simple manufacturing components that can actually be automatically put together, assembled, manufactured, there are a bunch of possibilities. Now, what we do is every 3 months, we actually have a trade fair where we invite people who are capable, who have either production capabilities or distribution capabilities or design capabilities to actually come in and actually pitch their ideas at these trade fairs. So once in 3 months, we actually do that. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, things are a little bit askew in timing, but it gives us also great opportunity to come in and see innovative new ways of how new manufacturing processes could be basically put in place. So those are certainly opportunities. If you actually go to the Disney website, you'll actually be able to see how and where you can attend. There may be also avenues like this in some of the regional offices. So that might also be possible, I don't know. But we certainly have it here in Los Angeles every 3 months.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Meenakshi has put up his hand for a question. So can you go with your question, please? Please unmute and put your question forward. You have to unmute yourself, sir.
Arjun, I have a question, Arjun. Arjun, I have a question.
Go ahead.
She's talking or I'll talk? She's talking or I'll talk? Okay, now I'll talk. Arjun, on this economic front and work and home culture, how do you say the future of movies will come around?
Chayan, I did not catch your question. I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Now in this work at home culture, okay, how do you bring the people to the theater?
So that's a great question. In fact, I actually had a couple of slides really on the COVID-19 effects. Unfortunately, there is no answer for that. We are seeing huge blowback because fundamentally we can't get our movies into theaters. The numbers I showed you from a worldwide box office of about 11 billion, right? We're looking at 2020 because of COVID-19 being 90% less than that. So assuming that we actually open up by September or so. So unfortunately, no, there isn't a mechanism of actually replacing the theater. There are a lot of concerns. Now, the nice thing is in Europe, some of the theaters are opening up where we are looking to see how the actual theater owners are providing the kind of social distancing that is needed. Remember, we don't actually maintain or own the theaters. It's really the AMCs, the PVRs, the Odeons. They're the ones who are actually operating it. So it's really dependent on them. So our fallback position is actually releasing these movies directly to our streaming platforms. So we have a movie called Artemis Fowl, which was slated for theatrical release. We actually released it on Disney Plus. So we've delayed Black Widow, some of our Pixar movies to later in the year, with the hope that we'll actually be able to get audiences back into theaters. China, as you heard, had opened up their cinemas and they ended up basically closing them back again. So that is a huge concern for us.
And again, can it be restricted? Like all movies has to come with a proper subscription. Now that's not happening because after 15 days or 10 days, the movie coming freely. So there is a loss on that because people wait for some time and then see the movie. So we'll have to make it as a continuous process when it's a worker to home culture. Because I don't think theaters will come out well because they don't have a common sense to open the theater with common condition and all those things, right? So why can't we make that kind of decision? All the theater people can give a solution to them. Like all movies has to be a lifetime subscription with a bigger amount so that everybody has to take that amount. Anyway, people are interested in seeing movies, right?
No, that's a good idea, except if you don't know how good the movie is, will you be willing to buy a lifetime subscription to it?
No, it's again on the product. If you're not interested, don't buy it. Anyway, all people want to see movies, right? They have their fans, they have their heroes. So naturally, they'll be interested in seeing the movies. Like for me, if I want to see Priyanka movies, I'll subscribe for Priyanka movies, right? I can do that. Go for a particular movie, which is visited.
Absolutely. So our model of providing the entire library is one mechanism, but that still doesn't, as you saw from the presentation, does not pay for a big blockbuster launch, right? The big blockbuster launch has a lot more things going on besides just Priyanka, which is why you're essentially looking at attracting yourselves as well as the other 2 billion people if possible.
And the big advantage will be like people coming on the roads and then enjoying this festival. That will reduce the tense situation, right? Because when they go for subscription, they go to a place and they'll see the movie, that's all. They don't come out and enjoy because it will be an individual team. It's not as a group. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Cherian. We'll limit the questions so that we give opportunity to others. Thank you, Cherian.
Yeah, may I kindly request all the participants to restrict with one question each, please. Consider the time factor. Mr. Meenakshi, are you going to continue with your question? Mr. Meenakshi? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello. Yeah. Mr. Arjun, I am Meenakshi Nathan from Sivagasi in 84 Chemical Branch.
Hello.
Thank you for your wonderful thing. Actually, I'm just asking, you are earning per picture 48 million US, right? Every picture you are aiming to have a profit of 48 million.
Oh, no. We are aiming for much higher profits.
No, minimum, I am telling.
No. I mean, so that was just an example for a movie like a blockbuster. We have smaller movies which the production costs are as low as 10 to 15 million. But for every movie, we're looking to essentially have a profitability way in excess of 50 million.
Oh, okay. I thought every movie you are earning 48 million is the minimum. So that how many movies you are making per year? I think you said 40 movies, huh? 40 blockbusters you are manufacturing.
We're doing about 4 or 5 blockbusters. We're doing about 40 movies altogether.
Okay. And one more question. If we travel to Disney Island and all that, any benefit we are getting, any discount? If we travel to Paris or if you are Japan or in your Disneyland, if we happen to go with the family, our Annamalai families, can we get any more discount than what the travel agents are offering with your support?
I'm sure. Why don't we talk separately?
Okay. Okay. The next question
Okay.
is from Mr.
Okay,
Mahendra
thank you.
Kumar to
Okay,
Mr.
yeah.
Arjun. The next question is from Mr. Mahendra Kumar to Mr. Arjun. The question goes like this: do you do any market research before deciding on what movie to make? If yes, who do you do?
So yes, absolutely.
I'll repeat the question.
No, I got it. I got it.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we do tons of market research. So as you saw from the actual earnings example, right? If we were to essentially, again, just use that as an example and just as a benchmark, for just illustrative purposes, domestically, a movie earned 70 million. And by the time we were done with all of the other slices of the pie, we were at about 425 million. So that's a conversion rate of about 6x. So every person wants a portion of that pie. So a ton of market research is actually carried out in terms of, A, does the story have the necessary points? Do we, if we were to cast, for example, Priyanka versus Amir Khan versus Shah Rukh Khan or Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise, if they're looking for a 20 million salary, what does that convert to? So we spend a lot of market intelligence and business intelligence in actually doing that. And we actually do all of that internally, because while there's a lot of data science associated with it, there's still a lot of gut and actual experience with the movie business, because fundamentally still nobody knows what makes a hit, right? So while we're looking at about actual in production 40 movies, we are evaluating close to 10 times more than that on a regular basis, just in terms of its viability and carriage of it through to production. Because we're committing essentially a huge outlay in terms of what our expectations are by basically slotting a movie into production.
Thanks. There is another serious question from Mr. Shivaraman. This question goes like this: whether the business opportunity in media and entertainment is paved only through technological methodologies, or it can still work with conventional method to work only with media industries?
So conventional methods are more and more relying on technological innovations. That's unfortunately just a fact of life today. Where it is hard to imagine somebody cutting strips of film together, because that doesn't exist anymore. So now you're essentially relying on technological elements along the way. Now, the actual craft of acting, the craft of actually capturing an image through the lens, those are all conventional schemes that will never go away. The very notion of how you frame a picture to make a beautiful photograph, that is still a fundamental creative aspect, and that's a conventional mechanism. But after that, being able to turn that into a final piece really does require a lot of technology nowadays.
Mr. Ramamurthy has asked for a question. Over to Mr. Ramamurthy. Mr. Ramamurthy, please do unmute.
Yeah, Arjun, great, Praso. I just have a quick question on the. You talked about cloud archival. So can you talk about a little bit on that? I didn't catch that much. What is that? What do you do? What do you archive, and which enterprise, or which companies you use for archival, right? Is there a cloud service? Which cloud service you use?
Sure. So one of the fundamental things that we've always maintained is never be single vendor, just because of all the problems that a single vendor can possibly introduce. So we utilize AWS and Microsoft's Azure. We're also working with the Google Cloud. Now, what we archive is actually a really good question. We obviously archive the final movie because that is the actual creative output of what the director and editor and everybody wanted. But we also archive each and every one of the pieces that actually go into making that, so that we can actually recreate that content. Like I mentioned earlier, for short form content, we can turn it around and say, can we basically take this particular piece and exploit that for social media? So we are archiving huge portions of content, and the opportunities there really come down to how can you build linkage systems, asset management and curation systems, where from a software standpoint, to Tariq's earlier question, building these mechanisms which will allow for you to really take advantage of all of the work in progress as well as the final archive.
There's a common question from Mr. Pratap. I'll read out his question. With COVID situation, people are consuming contents from the comfort of their home. Once things are back to normal, will people be interested in visiting theaters? What can bring people back to theaters? What could be the behavioral changes with people on content providers?
So we absolutely expect people to come back into theaters. And no matter how much content people are consuming at home, there is fundamentally an entirely different theatrical experience. There is no doubt that you can actually trick up your home entertainment system to be the new UHD 4K TV with HDR. You can have surround systems at home and all of that. But still, you are at home, which means you are open to all of the distractions. You're open to somebody knocking on the door, the phone ringing, or just being disturbed. Your suspension of disbelief, which is a fundamental thing of movie making, really happens in a theater when you're actually looking at a big screen. So we actually expect the theater going experience to be still very prevalent. The issue, of course, is are you willing to take the risk given COVID-19? And it'll take some time. So it will take some time, and the expectation is people will still come back.
Nice, sir. We will go with another 3 more questions, and then we'll go with member introduction. There is a question from Sashita. She asks, Sir, what would be the latest graphical software you would suggest the upcoming young designers can learn?
So obviously, if you want to be an animator or a 3D modeler, then you should really think about learning Maya. We talked about game engines quite a bit. We really see a lot of future in game engines. So I would say learn Unreal and Unity. And then there's a variety of texturing software from Blender to those platforms. If you enjoy the editing aspect of movie telling, then learn Adobe After Effects and Avid Media Composer. Those are good starting points.
There is a question from Mr. Shantakumar. Has mobile broken the barrier of production? Lot of user-generated content being produced. Does it pose a threat to the production companies?
Not at all. We actually encourage people because then people really understand what goes into creatively telling a story. So in fact, having more and more people experiment with these things provides more avenues for filmmakers to come and want to do it better. So yeah, shoot on mobile, shoot on your GoPro, shoot on anything, because that's just the way in terms of how you'll end up getting to be much, much better content.
So we'll go with the last question. There are lot many more questions, but I think that can be answered on one-to-one basis. So we'll go with the last question. Do Disney have institutions to build resource persons for their current and future requirements?
So do we have resources for current and future
Do
requirements?
Disney have institutions to build resource persons for their current and future requirements is the question.
So we have internship opportunities where we can actually build and bring people into production. But besides that, no, we actually go out to the marketplace and want to bring the best of breed talent into our production flow. We do not have really formal training institutes, just because that would imply that you're essentially providing just the Disney mindset, and we really want people. We really want people to bring their best creativity and their best talents. We don't have a training institute as such.
Okay.
So thanks for your patient reply.
I have a question. Can I ask the question?
Yeah, okay. Let that be the last question. Go ahead, Ariel.
Sir, very nice presentation, sir. Very informative thing. So we are in the robotics business actually. We are doing a lot of robotics for the manufacturing industry. We are doing, and a couple of entertainment business also. We are supplying. We are trying to supply robot for the entertainment parks like Wonderla, like that. So you have Disney have any idea to invest in a theme park in India? Or you want to start any entertainment studios? You have idea to invest in entertainment business in India? You have any plan to start any theme parks or any entertainment studio in India? Is it possible coming days?
So we already have entertainment studios in India, right? So Star India is Star, and everything that Star does from a production standpoint is already part of Disney. With regard to opening theme parks, as of now, no, but that doesn't mean tomorrow we wouldn't be interested. It's obviously all a question of what the market capability is. So.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.